Okay, so let's look at it. Some of the common gotchas you might have run into is, well, is the screen still frozen? Oh, there you go. Okay. So some of the gotchas that you might have run into is if you use like this, you will not be able to access this way because this is an arrow function. And JavaScript arrow functions will use the this of the outer context. It doesn't have its own this. Okay, so make sure to, if you need this, you always need to use the full function declaration. This is the shorthand. This is just the shorthand of this, if you're not familiar with that. This can be shortened to this. Okay, so but if you're using this normal function declaration, then you need to remember to return it, because you no longer have the implicit return of the arrow functions. So what we need to do, obviously this should accept a tags prop. So we're going to skip all the other thing, just use the most simple syntax, and so that we can access it inside our render functions. Now you can access this.tags here. It should be an array of strings. We'll just assume it's always an array of strings and we'll not care about validation or anything. The cool thing is that we're rendering, so we're rendering a list of the things. Essentially what we want is we have a root, which is a div, obviously, and it should have a list of children elements. So one easy way to think about this is like we want something like this. But notice that these tags will be coming from the tags dynamically, and we don't really know how long this array is going to be, right? So you have to construct this children array programmatically. So we can just map it, right? So because it's an array, and const children like this, and we just do this, right? So question is, how do we do this, right? So when we map it, for each tag, we're going to create a corresponding virtual node. So what we'll be returning is an hcall. And obviously, this hcall will just create this tag. And remember, another requirement of for the test to pass is that each of these elements should render the current index in the array. So to get that index, the map function, the iterator passed through the map function takes a second argument, which is the index. As you can see, VS Code is nicely hinting the function syntax for me. And we can use that. We can pass that number directly into the edge function, and we're done. So this is pretty much it. And this is, in fact, we can just copy this here to make it a one-liner. And this should suffice. Let's run a test.
You bump up the font.
What?
Editor or console.
Yeah, bump up the size. And it fails, of course. So, says what? Failed to, oh. Right, because I didn't register the component. Wait, no, I did.
You ran 3.2.
What?
You run the 3.2 test.
This is one test. Okay, yeah. Okay, run test. Yes, actually works. Okay. All right, so I hope this sort of gets you sort of familiarized with how render functions work. Everything is just JavaScript. When you need to return something, remember they need to be virtual nodes or text. Or in this case, we can actually pass numbers too. They get casted into strings. And you can optionally omit this data object. And if you want this thing to have attributes, you need to do something like this to give it an ID. So this is all hopefully self-explanatory enough. So let's move on to the next exercise. And it's going to be very similar. but with slightly different requirements. Where is the drag for this thing? Okay. So 3.2. Instead of dynamically rendering tags, we're now trying to dynamically render different components. So the goal is to first implement two very simple components, foo and bar, and all they should render is just foo and bar inside a div, and do that with a render function, obviously. And next, we're again going to implement an example component. And this time, this example component is going to take an OK prop. If OK is true, this example component will simply render the full component. And if OK is false, it'll render the bar component. And then in the root component, we want a button that allows us to toggle between foo and bar. And the boilerplate looks like this. So let's do that. Again, we'll spend 10 minutes.